Every morning before the first light touched the dusty streets of New Haven Colony, a soft knocking echoed through the quiet air. 3 gentle knocks, always the same rhythm, always at the same time. Evan Cole woke up to it again that morning. He rubbed his eyes, groaning softly. For almost 3 years that sound had been his strange alarm clock. When he opened his door, the cold air swept in, carrying the scent of rust and rain. And there she was again, the small alien girl. She stood on his doorstep barefoot, her silver hair tangled by the wind. Her skin shimmered faintly blue under the pale sunrise. She looked no older than 8, though her eyes, large, glowing, and full of sadness, seemed far older than any child's. She looked up at him and whispered the same single word she always said, "Daddy?" Evan's throat tightened as it always did when he heard that word. It cut through him like a blade. He sighed, shaking his head. "I told you before, kid. I'm not your father." The girl didn't move. She just stood there, shivering, her small hands clutching the corner of her thin gray blanket. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing more. Evan looked around. The neighbors' houses were dark, silent. No one else ever seemed to see her. Every time he reported her to the local patrol, they would come hours later, find no trace, and mark it as another false alarm. Some said she was a ghost. Others said she was an experiment gone wrong. Evan stopped calling them after the 5th time. He crouched down to her level. "Where's your home?" he asked gently. "Where's your mother?" But she only stared at him. The same stare, the same word. "Daddy." Evan sighed again and stood up. "You should go back," he said softly, closing the door. But he couldn't rest. He never could after seeing her. Every time she came, something deep inside him stirred, like a forgotten memory trying to surface. He poured himself a cup of bitter coffee, trying to shake the feeling off. The sound of her knocking replayed in his mind like an echo from another life. Hours later, while he worked on his repair drone inside the workshop, the wind howled outside. He glanced at the small monitor near his desk. It showed a view from the security camera above his door. The girl was still there. She hadn't moved. Rain had started to fall, cold and sharp. She was standing in it without shelter, without shoes. Her small frame trembled violently. Evan cursed under his breath and rushed to the door. When he opened it, the wind nearly pushed him back. The girl looked up weakly. Her lips were blue. She whispered again, softer this time. "Daddy." He saw blood dripping from her hands. Tiny cuts covered her palms as if she had fallen or been crawling. Evan's heart pounded. He couldn't just leave her there. He bent down and picked her up carefully. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, like a bird. "You're freezing," he muttered. "Let's get you warm." He brought her inside, wrapping her in an old thermal blanket. The girl looked around his small home as if she'd been there before. Her eyes stopped at a framed picture on the wall. Evan and a group of humans in uniform, standing near a transport ship. She pointed at it with a trembling finger. "Him," she whispered. Evan looked at the photo, confused. "That's me," he said. The girl nodded slowly, her lips forming the same word. "Daddy." A chill ran through him. He sat down beside her, unsure what to say. Maybe she'd seen him before, or maybe it was a coincidence. But how could she know his face from that picture? He hadn't served in years. That photo was from before the war, before the peace treaties, before the colony even existed. He turned to her again. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered and she fell asleep on the couch, her head resting against his arm. Evan stared at her, troubled. Outside, the storm grew stronger. He thought about calling the authorities again, but something in his gut told him not to. Something about her felt different this time. As thunder rolled across the colony, Evan glanced once more at the photo on the wall. The young man in uniform looked back at him with tired eyes. He remembered that day faintly, the mission that went wrong, the classified orders and the missing records afterward. He frowned. Could it be possible? His gaze fell on the sleeping girl. The blanket had slipped a little, revealing a small mark on her shoulder, an odd, faint symbol that looked almost like a circle of stars. Evan felt his pulse quicken. He had seen that mark before. Long ago. He whispered under his breath, almost afraid to speak the thought aloud. No. It can't be. But deep inside, he knew. This was no ordinary child. And tomorrow, she would knock again. The next morning, the colony skies were pale gray, heavy with leftover rain. Evan hadn't slept. He had stayed beside the couch all night watching the small alien girl breathe softly under the blanket. Every now and then, she whispered in her sleep. Soft words he couldn't understand, mixed with that one word that echoed in his chest. Daddy. He made a pot of coffee and looked around his tiny home. It was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. The girl stirred when the warmth touched her face. Her bright blue eyes blinked open, and she looked around in confusion. For a moment, fear crossed her face, but when she saw him, she relaxed slightly. Good morning, Evan said quietly. You, remember me? She tilted her head like she was trying to think. Then she nodded slowly. Daddy. He sighed. Right. We're still on that. He placed a cup of warm broth in front of her. She sniffed it, then drank it quickly as if she hadn't eaten in days. She ate everything he gave her without hesitation. She was starving. When she was done, she sat still, her hands folded neatly on her lap, like she was waiting for something. Evan studied her. Her features were strange but not frightening. Her skin shimmered faintly, and under her eyes were thin lines of silver, like glowing veins. She looked almost human, too human to be fully alien. I need to figure out who you are, he murmured, grabbing his old colony scanner. He gently took her wrist. She didn't resist. The device hummed softly as it scanned her ID signature. After a moment, the screen blinked red. No record found. Evan frowned. That's impossible. He tried again, switching to deep scan. The screen blinked again. Still nothing. No name, no birth planet, no family code, not even a registered species. It was as if she didn't exist. The girl watched his face carefully. Broken? She asked softly. He looked at her in surprise. You can speak more? She nodded a little. Not broken. Me? Not in there. Not in where? He asked gently. She pointed at the scanner. That thing. Not in there. Evan felt a chill. You know what this is? She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to the picture on the wall again, the same old photo of him in his uniform. Her small hand reached toward it, trembling. You were there, she whispered. Evan knelt beside her. Where? In the white place, she said quietly, her voice distant. Cold walls, lights, you sang. Evan froze. I sang? She nodded. When we cried. His chest tightened. A flash of pain shot through his head. For a second he saw a blur, a room full of small pods, glowing blue. Children inside. Crying. His own voice humming an old earth lullaby. Then it was gone, replaced by silence. He rubbed his temples, shaken. What was that? He whispered to himself. The girl touched his hand gently. You hurt? She said softly. They hurt me too. He stared at her. Who? She didn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears and she turned her face away. Evan stood up, running his fingers through his messy hair. Something was terribly wrong. He grabbed his communicator and called the colony registry. The screen flickered, and a tired officer appeared. Cole here, Evan said. I found a child. Alien. Maybe hybrid. No record in the system. I need to log a missing case. The officer typed something. Name? None. She calls herself, well, nothing really. Just calls me Daddy. The officer raised an eyebrow. You sure she isn't local? We've had prank cases before. Evan's voice hardened. She's injured. She's been showing up for 3 years. Someone needs to know. The colony night was silent except for the low hum of power lines. Evan sat by the window, the soft glow from the outside lights washing over his tired face. The girl, still nameless, still calling him Daddy, slept curled up on the couch beneath a worn blanket. Evan couldn't sleep. His mind spun with questions. Why did the registry mark her file as restricted? Why did she know his face, his voice, his name? And what was that flash in his mind? The memory of a white room, the sound of crying, the song he didn't remember ever singing? He opened his old datapad and began searching through the encrypted military archives he had kept from his service days. It was risky. Accessing old classified data could land him in serious trouble, but he needed answers. As the screen flickered to life, a familiar emblem appeared. Project Rebirth. Evan froze. He hadn't seen that name in years. It was supposed to be erased after the ceasefire between humans and the alien coalition. He hesitated, then tapped into the first recovered file. Project Rebirth. Objective: to create sustainable hybrid offspring capable of surviving multi-atmospheric environments. Research Team Cole. Lead engineer, Evan Cole. His heart skipped a beat. His own name. He scrolled through line after line of fragmented text, data logs, genetic codes, experimental records. It all came rushing back like a cold wave. He remembered joining the project after the war, when Earth scientists believed the only way for peace to last was through shared blood. They wanted children who were both human and alien, a living bridge. But the experiments, they hadn't gone as planned. The images on the screen changed. Medical chambers, children with glowing eyes, and frightened faces behind glass. He could almost hear their cries. Then one log entry caught his attention. Subject X7, female, age 2, genetic stability, high, bonded to caretaker Cole. Vocal recognition indicates emotional attachment. Evan's blood turned cold. He read it again, his hands shaking. The subject's description: silver hair, faint blue skin, small build. It matched her. He whispered, "No, it can't be." He scrolled further. The final entry was marked terminated, facility destroyed. But she was alive, standing proof that something had gone wrong or right in that explosion. Behind him, a soft voice broke the silence. "You remember now?" Evan turned quickly. The girl was awake, her bright eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She was sitting up, hugging the blanket to her chest. "Remember what?" he asked carefully. "The fire," she said. "The white place burning. You carried me." Evan's heart pounded. "I carried you?" She nodded slowly. "You sang. Then the lights went out." He felt dizzy. He sat down beside her. "How do you know this?" She looked up at him, tears filling her eyes. "Because you promised you'd come back." For a moment neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. Evan leaned forward, his voice breaking. "If I really was part of that project, then they lied to us all. They said it was shut down peacefully. They said no one survived." She frowned. "They took the others. They wanted to make more like me. I ran away." Evan's heart twisted. "You were just a child." She blinked slowly. "Still am." He smiled sadly. "Yeah, still are." Suddenly, a faint beep came from his tablet. He looked down and saw a red alert flashing across the screen. Unauthorized access detected. Tracking enabled. His stomach dropped. "No!" He rushed to the console and disconnected the power, but it was too late. His access to the restricted files had triggered a trace. Somewhere out there, someone now knew he was looking into Project Rebirth. The girl stood up, eyes wide. "They found us," she whispered. Evan grabbed his gear bag. "We need to leave now." "But where?" she asked softly. Anywhere but here, he said. If they come, they'll take you back, and I'm not letting that happen. He packed quickly, some rations, old weapons, a comm blocker. He turned to her. Can you walk? She nodded. I can. Before they stepped outside, Evan took one last look at his home. The walls that had once kept him safe now felt like a trap. The girl tugged his sleeve. They'll follow, she said. They always follow. He gave a grim smile. Let them. This time they'll get more than they bargained for. As they stepped out into the cold night, the colony lights flickered behind them. Far above, a faint drone moved through the clouds, its red eye scanning the ground below. The girl clung to his hand as they moved through the empty streets. Evan whispered to himself, Project Rebirth. You're coming back to haunt me. From a nearby comm tower, a robotic voice transmitted quietly. Subject X7 located. Initiate retrieval protocol. The wind carried the words away into the dark. Evan didn't look back. He could feel eyes watching them from the shadows, and he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere deep inside, a truth was waking. He didn't just create her. He had once risked everything to save her, and now he would do it again, no matter the cost. The next morning, a pale light broke through the gray sky. Evan and the girl hadn't slept. They had spent the night hiding in an old storage shed near the edge of the colony, listening to every hum and buzz in the air. The girl stayed close to him, silent, her silver hair tangled and her blue eyes full of worry. Evan's mind was racing. He kept replaying the words from the night before. Subject X7 located. Someone was coming. The moment he'd accessed the files, he had painted a target on both their backs. He looked down at the girl, who sat quietly beside an old crate. We need to move soon, he whispered. If they track us here, we're finished. She nodded slightly but didn't speak. Her eyes darted toward the door as if she already sensed danger. Evan checked his wrist communicator. The network connection was dead, blocked. They were off-grid. Good, he muttered. At least they can't trace a signal. Just as he was about to open the shed door, a soft knock echoed. 3 sharp taps. Evan froze. It wasn't the gentle knock of a child. It was hard, deliberate, metallic, the kind used by security officers. He motioned for the girl to stay quiet and crept toward a small crack in the wooden door. Outside stood 2 tall figures in dark gray coats. Their faces were hidden behind thin visors that shimmered faintly in the light. Their voices, when they spoke, were calm, but cold. Mr. Evan Cole, one said, we're here under authority of Galactic Child Services. We believe you are harboring an unregistered hybrid. Evan's heart pounded. He recognized that tone. Not real social workers, government agents. He opened the door a few inches, keeping his body between them and the girl. You've got the wrong place, he said flatly. The taller agent smiled faintly. Do we? Your ID logs show recent access to restricted files. That's a violation of Article 9. Evan tried to stay calm. Those files are mine. I worked that project years ago. That's precisely why we're here, the other said. You may not realize the danger of what you're dealing with. The child is property of the Galactic Research Division. Evan's jaw clenched. Property? She's a person. Not legally, the agent replied, his tone chilling. She's an experiment, and you, Mr. Cole, are harboring government material. Behind him, the girl whispered softly. Don't let them take me, Daddy. The words hit him like a knife to the chest. He turned slightly, just enough to see her clutching her blanket, fear in her eyes. The taller agent's visor glowed faintly. You see? She's already imprinted on you. That makes her unstable. Step aside, Mr. Cole. Evan stepped back, but not to let them in. He grabbed the pulse blaster from his belt and aimed it straight at them. You're not taking her anywhere. The agents didn't flinch. You won't win this, Cole, one said. You know what happens to people who disobey orders. Evan's voice was calm, but his hand was steady. Yeah, I do. I've seen what your orders do to children. For a tense moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the agent's equipment and the faint crackle of the blaster's charge. Then, suddenly, the shorter agent raised his wrist and tapped something. A tiny red light blinked on his sleeve. "We'll give you 48 hours, he said. "Bring her to the drop zone at Sector 7, if not—" He looked at the girl. "We'll come for her ourselves." Evan didn't answer. He kept the blaster trained on them until they turned and walked away, their boots leaving deep marks in the muddy ground. When they were gone, he stared out the crack in the door, watching the rain fall softly outside. He whispered to himself, "They think she's a mistake, but I see something they don't." Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting his face. She's hope. And somewhere far above the clouds, unseen ships began to move, heading straight toward them. The first streaks of dawn cut through the clouds, painting the colony in shades of steel and orange. But to Evan, it didn't look like morning. It looked like a warning. The air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. He tightened the straps on the hover truck, loaded the last of his gear, and turned toward the small figure standing by the door. The girl was clutching her thin blanket, her eyes wide and quiet. She looked even smaller in the growing light, fragile yet strangely calm. "Come on," Evan said softly. "We're leaving." She climbed into the passenger seat, holding the blanket close as he powered up the truck. The engine hummed low and steady. Evan's hands gripped the controls. He glanced once more at the shed, the only place that had felt safe for a moment, and then drove away. Behind them, the colony was waking up. Workers moved through the streets, unaware that government agents were already there, scanning, searching. The news would spread soon. Evan Cole, former engineer, suspected of harboring a hybrid. The road ahead stretched into the storm fields, a wasteland of broken rock and glowing fog. It was dangerous terrain, full of static winds that could rip apart a vehicle, but it was also the one place where sensors couldn't track them. As they crossed the boundary, the girl looked up at him. "Why are they chasing us?" she asked softly. Evan exhaled, keeping his eyes on the road. "Because of what you are. They don't see a child. They see a project that escaped," she frowned. "But you don't see that?" He shook his head. "No, I see someone who's been through too much. Someone who deserves better." The girl was quiet for a while. Then she whispered, "You're not like them." Evan smiled faintly. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in years." Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the mountains ahead. The storm was close now, swirling like a living thing. The hover truck rattled as strong winds slammed against it. Evan activated the stabilizers, but even they struggled to keep balance. "Hold on tight," he said. A burst of lightning struck nearby, blinding them for a second. The truck shook violently, alarms blaring. The girl gasped and grabbed his arm. Through the blinding rain, Evan saw dark shapes moving in the storm. Drones. Sleek, silent, and fast. "They found us," he muttered. The drones swooped lower, firing small bursts of plasma. One hit the side of the truck, sending sparks flying. The dashboard screamed red warnings. Evan gritted his teeth and pushed the engine harder. "Can you drive faster?" she asked, voice trembling. "I'm trying," he said, steering into the fog. "But if this storm gets worse, even faster won't save us." The wind howled louder, roaring through the metal frame. Rain lashed the windshield like knives. Evan's eyes darted to the scanner. It showed multiple signals closing in. Then suddenly a blast hit the rear engine. The hover truck spun, skidding across wet rock before crashing into a ditch. Smoke filled the cabin. Evan coughed, unbuckled, and turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, coughing softly. "No." He reached back and grabbed a small emergency pack. "We can't stay here. They'll find us." They climbed out into the storm. The air was cold and full of electric light. The ground shook with thunder. Evan pulled her close and led her toward a dark opening in the cliff ahead, an old mining tunnel. By the time they reached it, the drones were already sweeping the area, their red lights cutting through the fog. Evan pulled her inside and pressed his hand against the wall panel. The door slid shut with a hiss, sealing them in. Inside it was dark except for the faint glow from her eyes. Evan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His clothes were soaked, his body aching. The girl reached out and touched his arm gently. "You saved me again," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "I seem to be making a habit of that." As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed old mining tools scattered around and a small console still active, flickering weakly. He approached it, brushing off the dust. It was ancient tech, but it might still hold data. He connected his wrist device. The screen came alive, showing encrypted logs from years ago. Project Rebirth, Secondary Facility, Deep Sector 12. Evan's heart skipped. Sector 12, he whispered. That's where the original lab was destroyed. The girl stepped closer. I remember the number, 12. He looked at her, shocked. You remember that? She nodded slowly. That's where you sang. Lightning flashed again outside, lighting the tunnel for a moment. Evan's breath caught. This wasn't random. Every memory she had, every word she spoke, was leading him back to the truth. He sat down on the cold floor, exhausted. You shouldn't remember that, not at your age. The girl crouched beside him, her tiny hand resting on his knee. You forgot, she said softly. They made you forget. Her voice was small, but her words carried weight. Evan looked at her, realization dawning. They erased my memory, to hide what really happened. The storm howled outside, shaking the ground. He reached over and pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Then we'll find the rest, he said firmly. Whatever they took from us, we're taking it back. The girl nodded against his chest. I believe you, Daddy. And for the first time, he didn't correct her. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the tunnel, a spark of something stronger had been lit. Hope. The storm outside had calmed, but inside the old mining tunnel, the air was heavy with silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the ancient console still flickering near the wall. Evan sat beside it, soaked, exhausted, and staring into the glow like it held answers to everything he'd lost. The girl sat close, wrapped in her blanket, her silver hair clinging to her face. Every few minutes she looked toward the tunnel entrance as if expecting danger. But no drones came. Not yet. Evan wiped a hand over his tired eyes. We can't stay here forever, he murmured. They'll track us soon. We need to know where to go next. The girl's eyes shimmered faintly blue in the dark. The answers are here, she said softly. He turned to her. What do you mean? She pointed toward the console. It remembers. Like you should, Evan frowned. What do you mean I should? She didn't reply. Instead, she crawled over to the console and pressed her small hand against its surface. To his surprise, the screen flared to life, symbols shifting rapidly. She wasn't typing, she was communicating. Wait, how are you doing that? Evan asked, moving closer. She glanced at him. They taught me how to talk to machines. Said I was part of them. The screen began loading files one after another. Evan's heart raced as familiar words appeared again. Project Rebirth, Deep Sector logs. He leaned closer, scanning through old entries. Many were corrupted, but one caught his eye. It was marked with his name. Lead Engineer E. Cole. He opened it. The video flickered, and suddenly his own face appeared on the screen. Years younger, wearing a white uniform. Evan's breath caught. That's me. The recording began to play. Day 239, the younger Evan said. Subject X7 shows stable hybrid development. Emotional patterns improving. She's begun calling me by a familiar title, Daddy. I don't know why, but it feels wrong to correct her. The girl's eyes widened. She looked at him silently as the recording continued. They said she's the only one who survived the first phase. The others couldn't adapt. I was told to prepare her for transport to Sector 12 for termination. I can't. I'll hide her before they find out. They're already watching me. The video froze there. Evan's chest tightened painfully. I saved you, he whispered. I hid you. The girl nodded slowly, her voice trembling. You promised to come back, but they took you away before you could. Evan sat back, memories flooding in like breaking waves. He saw flashes, bright lights, soldiers shouting, fire tearing through the lab. He remembered holding her small body as alarms screamed. He remembered whispering to her, "Don't be afraid," before handing her to a smuggler ship. And then darkness. They erased it, he whispered, staring at the console. They wiped my mind clean. They made me forget everything. The girl's eyes glistened. You kept your promise. You came back. He reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. Not soon enough. The console beeped again, pulling his attention back. A final file was opening, one labeled Memory Seal Protocol. Lines of data scrolled quickly and a small blinking prompt appeared. Neural key found. Evan Cole. Activate recovery? He hesitated. His hands trembled. If he pressed yes, he didn't know what would happen. The girl placed her small hand over his. You're ready now, she whispered. Evan took a deep breath and pressed activate. A burst of light shot from the console, followed by a sharp pain in his head. He fell to his knees, gasping. The tunnel spun around him. Images poured into his mind. Hundreds of them, years of stolen memories flashing by. He saw her first steps inside the lab. Her first laugh. The day she learned to speak. The day he promised her that she would never be alone. Then the explosion. The chaos. The soldiers dragging him away as he screamed her name, and then... nothing. Until the knock at his door 3 years ago. When the pain finally faded, he was trembling. The girl knelt beside him, worried. Daddy? He looked up at her, tears in his eyes. But this time he smiled through them. Yes, he whispered. I remember now. She hugged him tightly, and for the first time he hugged her back without hesitation. I thought I'd lost you forever, he said softly. I waited, she whispered. Every morning, I waited. He held her close, his voice breaking. You don't have to wait anymore. But as the console flickered again, the last message appeared on the screen. Warning, neural recovery signal transmitted. Tracking engaged. Evan's stomach dropped. They know where we are, he said sharply. The girl looked up at him, fear returning to her face. Then we run again? He stood, his mind clear for the first time in years. No, he said firmly. This time we fight. He grabbed his gear and powered up the console's defense grid. Outside, distant thunder began to rise again. Not from the storm, but from ships descending through the clouds. Evan turned to her, eyes burning with resolve. They took our memories, our peace, our lives, but they don't get to take our future. The girl nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Outside, the rumble grew louder. The storm of war was coming again. Only this time, humanity's heart was ready to fight back. The tunnel walls trembled as thunder rolled across the valley. Not from nature this time, but from engines. Bright flashes lit up the entrance, each one closer than the last. The air was filled with the low roar of approaching ships. They had been found. Evan stood near the console, his face hard but calm. The girl stood beside him, clutching his arm. Her glowing blue eyes reflected the light from the approaching drones that filled the mist outside. They're here, she whispered. I know, he said quietly. And this time they're not taking you. He moved quickly, grabbing his old engineering kit. His hands worked with purpose, connecting wires, adjusting circuits, activating defense nodes that hadn't been used in years. Sparks flew as old machines hummed back to life. The girl watched him. What are you doing? Giving them something they won't expect, he said, pulling open a control panel. If they want to erase us again, I'll make sure the galaxy remembers what they tried to hide. Outside, searchlights swept over the valley. Dozens of drones circled, and behind them, a massive transport ship descended through the clouds, bearing the insignia of the Galactic Research Division, the same organization that once ran Project Rebirth. The girl's voice shook. They'll destroy everything. Evan turned to her, kneeling so they were face to face. Not everything, he said. They can't destroy the truth. He pulled out the memory chip he'd extracted from the console. the full archive of Project Rebirth. "This," he said, holding it up, "is every crime they tried to bury. If I transmit it to the galactic net, everyone will know what they did. To all of them." Her eyes widened. "They'll come for you if you do," he smiled sadly. "They already have." Before she could answer, the tunnel door exploded inward with a blast of white light. The sound echoed like thunder. 2 agents stepped through the smoke, weapons raised. Behind them, more shadows moved. "Evan Cole," one of them shouted. "You are ordered to surrender the specimen immediately." Evan stood his ground. "Her name is not a specimen." The agent took a step forward. "She's property of the Galactic Division. Hand her over and you might live." Evan's hand tightened around the transmitter. "You took my memories, my work, and my life. I won't let you take her again." The agent's visor flashed red. "Then you die with her." He raised his weapon. But before he could fire, a sharp pulse of blue energy surged through the air. The old tunnel defense grid, which Evan had reactivated minutes earlier, came alive. Energy barriers flared, forcing the agents to the ground. "Now," Evan shouted. He grabbed the girl's hand and ran toward the back tunnels. As they moved, he pressed the transmitter, sending the data to every open relay tower within range. The console screen behind him flashed. "Transmission in progress." 12%, 35%. Bullets of plasma scorched the walls around them. The girl stumbled and Evan caught her arm. "Keep going," he urged. The tunnel shook violently as explosions echoed from outside. Dust fell from the ceiling. The light flickered, then dimmed. Evan glanced at his wrist screen. Transmission 87%. Trant. Then a voice came over the comm. "Cole, shut it down!" "You don't understand what you're doing." He barked back. "No, you don't understand what you've done." Finally, the screen blinked. 100%. Data uploaded. The files of Project Rebirth were now free, broadcast across every system in the sector. The truth could never be erased again. Evan turned to face the entrance. Dozens of agents stood there, weapons drawn. He stood between them and the girl, unarmed but unshaken. "If you want her," he said, "you'll have to go through me." The girl clutched his arm. "Daddy, don't—" He smiled softly. "It's okay. This is what I was meant to do." The agents raised their weapons. Just as they fired, a deep rumble shook the ground again, not from their guns, but from above. Through the hole in the roof, a massive shadow passed, a ship unlike the others, sleek and glowing with alien blue light. It descended fast, scattering the attackers. The girl gasped. "They came—" Evan looked up. "Who?" "The others," she whispered. "The ones who survived." From the ship, beams of light burst forth, striking the ground near the agents. The drones exploded one after another. A ramp extended and tall alien figures stepped out. Hybrids like her, older now, strong and glowing with the same silver-blue skin. One of them looked at Evan and nodded. "You kept your promise, human." Evan exhaled, relief flooding his chest. "Took me a while," he said. The girl smiled through her tears. "I told them you'd come." Evan turned to her, his voice soft but steady. "And I told you I'd never stop trying." As the hybrids guided them aboard the ship, dawn broke over the storm-torn valley. Golden light spilled through the clouds, washing over the ruins below. On the horizon, the colony's broadcast towers began flashing with the news. Project Rebirth exposed. Government experiment on children revealed. The galaxy had finally heard the truth. Evan stood at the ramp, holding the girl's hand as the ship rose into the sky. She leaned her head against his arm and whispered, "Daddy?" He looked down at her, smiling faintly. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'm here." And for the first time in years, the word didn't ache, it felt right. As the ship ascended into the clouds, sunlight broke through completely, scattering the shadows below. A new dawn had come, not just for one lost child, but for all who had been forgotten. And above it all, the stars watched in silence, as humanity and its children, human and hybrid, took their first step toward a kinder, brighter tomorrow.